CTD is finally back with another lap guide. We've had a little bit of a hiatus there. This last season was definitely a very busy one for everybody, but we're starting off strong. So moving into season 3 with our new track, The Bend, we're driving the international circuit. This is definitely a very technical track. A lot of late apexes, a lot of patience, a lot of compromising one corner to better set up the exit of another one. Um, a lot of this lap is pretty deceiving too. So if you haven't driven this yet or haven't gotten any sight laps yet, definitely be very patient with it. It's definitely going to take some time. It's not as intuitive as learning, say, Road Atlanta or Daytona or any of the the usual IMSA tracks necessarily. This feels a lot like a club track, especially with all the different layouts and all the different configurations that this track can run. Now, with that being said, we're going to get right into it as we round this last corner here. Now, coming across the start-finish line, obviously we have our pit lane to our left-hand side. And we have a very interesting blend line right off the bat to start our lap. So you're definitely going to want to be on the left side of the track here. You'll have to cross over this blend line in order to get the lap time out of it. Now, during a sprint race, this is definitely not too much of an issue. On the longer races, or if you see any cars that are in the pit lane on your relative, for example, if they are in the pit lane on your relative, they will be kind of a duller color than if they're on the same lap as you, a lap ahead, a lap before, blah, blah, blah. But they will be a duller color. So that would give you an indication that there's somebody in the pit lane, and then you just need to keep your eyes on a swivel coming up here just to make sure that they're not exiting pit lane. If they are, and you cut across this blend line and hit them, that will 100% be on you as far as a racing incident goes, in which case you'd have to go obviously to the right side of our blend line and then rejoin to the left after the fact. Now coming up to turn 1, it's very tricky to pick a braking zone. Now we can see my brake lights are coming on right as we pass this blue cone, indicating the end of the pit lane exit. So this has been the most consistent brake marker for me. Now to go over brake markers just real quick, we only use brake markers as a reference point. Depending on the speed that you have, whether it's a little bit faster or a little bit slower, will kind of dictate if you need to be braking before or after that reference mark. Just as an example, if I had a draft coming down the start-finish line, I would definitely need to be braking just slightly before this reference point. If I had a bad exit on the last corner, then I'd get away with braking slightly later. Now coming up to the apex, we want to stay all the way to the left-hand side here. If we start to turn in too early, you have one of two things that are probably going to go wrong for you. The first one is smacking this turtle curb itself. Now, these raised curbs around the International Bend circuit is very aggressive. If you hit them, they will cause the car to jump. You're going to lose a little bit of rotation and get pushed out pretty wide. Now, the other alternative, if you were to turn in a little too early, so let's say we started turning in back here, and then we kind of crab walk over to the apex, you're likely going to carry too much speed. And once we get about here, you're going to start pushing out pretty wide to the left-hand side. Now, generally, we want to make sure that we're tracking all the way out to the left. So you'd think that my car is way far to the right. Now, the reason being, we want to make sure that we're setting up the exit of turn 1 for a good entrance into this turn 2 little kink here. So if we get all the way to the left-hand side of the track, this corner becomes extremely difficult to get around, especially carrying speed. So you wind up just delaying every single corner from there. So if we back up just a little bit here, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see with this angle. But if we push all the way out to the left-hand side on the exit of T1 and try to carry speed moving forward, we'll wind up pushing all the way to the right hand side of the exit of T2, and then that makes you late for the entry to T3. So you can kind of see how this just compounds negatively for your lap time. So we want to make sure that we're setting really the exit of T3 right here. We want to make sure that we're setting this up all the way at the beginning of T1's apex. Now to back up just a little bit, coming through T2, I do take a little bit of curb here. Honestly, on this lap, that's too much. You can get away with brushing right up against the edge of this, or maybe even 3/4 of the way to the top. Once you get to the actual top and start jumping this curb, it's going to be pretty aggressive, and like I said, it's going to push you out wide. So you can actually see my car jumps around and gets pretty unsettled. Luckily, I save it. I had several laps where I definitely did not, so keep that in mind. Now as we come in, once the car settles, you can kind of see how there's a bit of a road crown. So in the very center of the track here is the highest point. On the right hand side, it kind of dips down into a little ditch, and the same goes for the left hand side. Once we wind up in the middle of the track, we can start our braking zone approaching T3. You're going to downshift into second gear, and what's really important is we get that late apex. So we want to be on the back side of this larger inside turtle curbing here. What that's going to help is make sure that we get a really good exit out of this corner. It's an increasing radius on exit, so we want to make sure that we're lining the car up accordingly. So we can see that the corner is still kind of turning right even after we're exiting this. So once again, we want to make sure that our car is pointed as far to the right as possible. If we apex too early and our car is pointed farther out towards the tire barriers out here, you'll start tracking out, you'll push too far to the left, and you'll start to drive off track. You have to lift off the throttle, keep turning the car, and you're going to lose a lot of time this way. So be very patient coming in through the apex of that corner. You can track all the way out to the left here. Now this corner is pretty deceiving too. It seems like it's super wide. You'll see that I tire dipped on the right hand side there into the dirt just to help open this corner up. I grab all of the curving at the apex, and even then I'm still tracking all the way out to the Candy King curves on the right there. So play around with that, be pretty patient. The more speed you start to carry through that section, the harder and harder it'll get not going off track on exit there. Now coming up to our next corner, we don't have any super great visuals or markers to use. All we've got here is the 150, 150 board on our left hand side. Now I'm on a single monitor, so the way that I've approached this one in particular is to wait for that 100 board to pass me. So we can see I'm getting on the brakes here. If we go to far chase, it's right before the 100 board. So maybe about a half of a car width, or half of a car length, excuse me. If you're on triple monitors, you might have to wait until it's in your peripheral vision on your left monitor. If you're VR, you might be able to look around just a smidge to the left to see where that is exactly. But again, this is just a reference. So kind of play around with that too. See where it's at visually on your screen as a reference, and start your braking. Now coming into the turn, initially you might want to try coming really wide on entry and ensuring that you get a really late apex on this corner. It's definitely the safest way to learn this. It's a little bit easier and a little bit more consistent as well. As you start to build speed and pick up some more lap time, what I found was the fastest line here was to actually take a middle of the road line. We're going to stay middle of the track and then apex super late here. So by the time we're actually hitting an apex, the curbing is actually basically ending. Now this is super important to note. We want to make sure that our car is getting to this gray patch of curbing here. If we're apexing any sooner than this and we start to build our throttle back up, we're going to wind up pushing off to the right hand side on track out. So once we hit that spot, we can start building our throttle back up. And then this is where we assume the name The Bend actually comes from. This is a series of, I believe, 4 right-handers So we're going to just kind of hold the steering angle. I also need to back up just briefly. You might feel that you want to keep it pretty tight through this section, all the way up to the right-hand side. Now, it's important to be all the way to the left to open up this next second right-hander. This is another, we want to make sure that the car is pointed in the right direction. If we keep it too tight in this section, the car will have essentially under-rotated. So when we go through the second right-hander, once we reach the end of this curbing here, instead of the car being pointed towards these curbs, it'll be pointed a little bit more towards this truck out here. And you're going to have to lift off throttle, potentially even brakes to make this next corner. Now we want to use as little brakes as possible. Ideally, even this is probably too much. I think the smoothest way to get through here is actually to just modulate your throttle. So as we lift off throttle, we can see that the car turns a little bit more to the right. Once we lift off, all the weight's going to move to the front end of the car, and that's going to help get the front tires some more grip. That's going to give us some more turning. Now, if you do need to use a little bit of brake, that's definitely okay too. On track out of that third right-hander, we can hit the curb here. Now, you have to be very careful in this section. My left side tires are getting on the grate here. I get away with it, but just barely. As you accelerate while you're on the grate to this left side of the curbing, it can actually suck you onto it, and you'll continue to go straight, and then you'll miss your turn in for this next right-hander. So keep that in mind. Definitely play with it as you track out more and more to the left through this corner, but ideally you want to be on the curbing here. This is another one of we want to get close to this turtle strip. I do miss it by a couple feet on this lap. So right side tires onto the candy cane curves for the apex. And we don't want to track all the way out to the left. If we do, it will make this next left-hander that much more difficult to get through. Ideally, to open up this next section, you would stay in the middle of the track on track out, but that will make your exit a little bit slower. So coming into this left-right combination, just a little bit of brakes to help slow the car down, get it turned, and then as soon as we get the car settled, again, we've got just that little bit of crest in the center of the road, so a little bit of a dip to the right and to the left. Once we get to that center of the track, we can start getting on the brakes, get the car slowed down, downshift into third. Now this green painted section on the curbing is my marker to start accelerating. In the cockpit view, this entire corner is very blind, so you can't really see where you're going, especially if we back up. From this point, all we can see is a continuation of the same corner. So as long as we use this little green patch and we keep it super tight on this right-hander, this is a good indication of the car is ready to get back on throttle. So once we approach that, you can see I'm back to 100%. We're going to track all the way out to the left-hand side here. You can even take out some of those cones without getting an off track. Now coming up to our next right-hander, this is another deceiving one. There's a lot going on here. Again, there's not super great markers to use. As we approach the 50 board, I'm already on the brakes. Now we want to use the curb just a little bit to help open up the entry. And I'm actually downshifting 2 times here. So I'm downshifting from 5th to 3rd. We want to make sure that we're keeping it pretty tight up against this curve, because as we crest the hill, all the weight will rise upwards essentially. So you'll lose a lot of the mechanical grip on your tires. The closer we keep it to the right here before the end of the curbing, the easier it'll be to track out without going too far. Now coming up to our next 2 left-handers, we're going to start braking at the very beginning of the curbs. Now we want to make sure that we're getting a late apex into this corner as well. You can see we're getting right on the curb towards the very end of it. Now something to note, what I found was the most useful is to try to get the car pointed to these Adelaide signs. If the car is pointed in that direction, that means that you've rotated the proper amount. If your car is pointed farther towards the right-hand side of the pit lane, you've definitely under-rotated, and what will happen after you crest the hill is you'll go off track into the dirt here, which we definitely don't want. With the elevation change here, if we get into the dirt, the car will already be unsettled, and then you'll likely have a spin or a super far off track here. So keep that in mind. Where that car is pointed is definitely going to be very, very valuable. Now for our second left-hander, we're going to use the very end of the curbs here as our turn-in marker. This is another blind corner, so there's a couple different ways we can approach this. My approach for this particular one is once we reach the end of our curb here, I'm going to lift off throttle, get the car turned to the left and let it coast. There's a little bit of a compression zone here. And when we look at cockpit, once we can identify where this bigger turtle curb is, and we get the car pointed in that direction to drive right up against the side of it, we can get back on throttle. Now why that's important is, again, it's an increasing radius on exit. So if we build throttle too soon or carry too much speed, you'll wind up all the way out here in the grass. Now with that being said, if you do get on throttle a little too early and you wind up pushing too far to the right hand side here, you can actually still get all four tires in the grass and just collect an off track and not a slowdown. Where the limit is into the grass as to how far you can go, I don't have an answer for, but don't think that you have to brake and get the car completely stopped to continue making this corner. You can just take the off track and then rejoin the track safely farther up the road here. Now coming into our second to last corner, again we have our three 150, 100, and 50 boards. At the 100 board, this is my reference to use. So we're braking just before this, and we're going to downshift from 5th all the way down to 2nd. We want to use our curbing on the left-hand side here to help open up the corner. And there's not a lot of camber here on top of the car going slightly uphill. So we can see just a little bit of a crest here. So the car will get light. It's not going to want to turn, so you have to be very patient through this corner. As we crest this very subtle hill, we're going to want to keep using our trail braking pressure, as we can see. Now once we're into this little compression zone, just a smidge of camber, we can start building our throttle back up. This is another corner where we've got this turtle curbing, that we definitely want to avoid. If you smack this one, this will throw you way out into the dirt on the left-hand side. Now I do make just a smidge of a mistake here. The car gets a little bit loose, but we can use all of this track out here. I even dip my left side tires just briefly into the dirt, right up against the edge here. Any farther than that, we're risking an off track, so this is just about the limit. And as we come into the last corner, this one's been the trickiest one for me to get consistent. As we approach the 50 board, we're going to downshift actually from 4th to 3rd with just the smallest bit of brake pressure, as we can see here. Now the downshift from 4th to 3rd is for a couple different reasons. Number one, it's going to help us rotate the car into the corner. We use just a little bit of trail braking pressure to help get us to the apex. Now on exit, because this is slightly uphill, at least in the Cayman, 4th gear bogs and it does not have enough speed to get us up the hill. Where 3rd gear has enough oomph to kind of drive us up and over, carry that momentum, get just maybe a 10th or two, depending on how good the exit is. And from there we cross our start finish. So just a couple things to note. This is a brand new track. There's very, very limited footage of this. There's no data other than the laps that have been driven around here in the last handful of days. So be patient. Now, with that being said, moving into officials, expect a pretty wide range of skill levels around here. You have to be pretty patient with other drivers. Um, as well, expect some chaos and some unpredictability, because again, nobody's really that familiar with this place. It's got a great flow. There's not going to be a ton of passing opportunities, so make sure your qualifying counts. Other than that, we'll see you guys next week. Good luck in your officials.